Ms. Owens?
Here.
Ms. Weber?
Here.
Mr. Moldaver?
Here.
Mr. Hawkins?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chen. That brings us to item number 3 on the Wednesday, June 17th meeting of the Creeks and Watersheds Advisory Committee, which is the consideration and approval of the draft minutes for May 20th, 2015. Are there any corrections, amendments, or questions about the draft minutes, or is there a motion to accept them as submitted?
I'll motion to accept as submitted.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the draft minutes of the May 20th, 2015 meeting. For those of you who were there, you know what an exciting meeting it was. The minutes don't capture the drama, but all those in favor of accepting the draft minutes and approving them signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain because I missed all the drama at the last meeting.
You missed a lot, but the minutes stand approved. Thank you. That brings us to item number 4, adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Benson, are there any changes?
No adjustments, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. That brings us to item number 5, public comment. Any member of the local community can come forward and speak for up to 2 minutes on any related topic not already listed on today's agenda. Is there anyone who would like to speak briefly? Seeing no one, I would like to offer one public comment. And for those who are actually watching today, on Thursday, June 18th, is a very, very special birthday for one of Santa Barbara's most respected civic leaders, Sylvia Glass. So any of you out there who know Sylvia, please remember to recognize that it's a very, very special day. Other than that, that brings us to item number 6, committee member and staff communications. Mr. Benson, anything to report?
No.
Right. Anything from any members of the committee to report? All right. Looks like that takes care of item number 6. Now we're coming to item number 7, which is a very exciting item. Water Quality Research and Monitoring Program update and fiscal year 2016 Research and Monitoring Plan.
Mr. Chair, actually, if we could start with 7B and then we'll do 7A after, that would be great.
I thought about that, but I didn't want to start at the dinner hour the meeting with a discussion of the poop loop. However, we have one of our very, very best staff, Liz Smith, who will start us off with item 7B, Community-Based Social Marketing Campaign Update.
Thank you, Mr. Moldaver. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Smith, Creeks Outreach Coordinator, and I'm here tonight to talk about our community-based social marketing campaign, Close the Poop Loop. So, a CBSM campaign is a requirement of the city's Stormwater Management Program, or SWIMP, or General Permit. For this project, we partnered with the county and other jurisdictions within the county. And the total contract amount with S. Groner Associates out of Long Beach was just over $41,000, and the cost to the city was $4,643. The county took the lead on this contract. They sent out the RFP and interviewed consultants, and we all the jurisdictions got together to select S. Groner and Associates. So, CBSM compared to our traditional outreach methods like TV and radio. With our traditional outreach, we hope to inspire behavior change through education, information, and awareness of water quality issues. These are large campaigns, they're widespread, and it's difficult to measure the results. So as you know, every 5 years we do a large public opinion survey, and that's when we can find out, have people been seeing our ads? Are they getting the message? Are they remembering it? Are they changing their behaviors? With CBSM, it's much more targeted, and it's really focused on measurable behavior change. So you go through a really specific method. So you select your desired behavior, identify barriers and benefits, you provide prompts and incentives, you ask for a personal commitment from the community, and what you hope to do is create a social norm from that desired behavior. And so you pilot the project first on a smaller scale, and if it's found to be effective, then you expand it. So Close the Poop Loop campaign, our targeted pollutant is obviously pet waste, and our desired behavior was for people to pick up the pet waste and get it into the trash. We've all seen bagged dog poop all over the beach, the trails, all over town. Each jurisdiction chose a target location to pilot the project, and for us, we chose Arroyo Burro, the off-leash dog beach. And as far as I know, this is the only official off-leash dog beach between Monterey and Long Beach, so you can imagine it's very heavily used. People do take their dogs to other beaches, but it's not really allowed. So, our campaign goals were to create a community of dog owners through campaign participation, to decrease the numbers of unattended pet waste at the pilot locations. We were looking for 250,000 impressions, that's online views, including our website, social media posts, news stories, anywhere we could get this in front of people's eyes. We were looking for 250 pledges and 300 newsletter signups. So SGA developed our campaign materials, and this is the city's yard sign that we posted at our target location at Arroyo Burro. And this is really our visual prompt. So as people are entering the beach, this is right next to the staircase, and this is closer to the creek. We want them to see this and remember, 1, to take their bag, and 2, to bring it back to the trash can and not leave it on the beach. And this is the poster and postcards that SGA created. Each jurisdiction chose a dog. And the postcards we created with the city's dogs and also with some extra breeds just because they were really fun illustrations, and that would be a fun thing for people to try to find their own dog in our selection of dogs. On the back of the postcard, you can see our incentive. And so that was a little keychain flashlight with the campaign messaging and the website and some information about why pet waste is a problem. We had business partners in the community who agreed to post the posters and postcards at their locations. And they were primarily dog-related businesses, but also Channel Keeper, Esau's Restaurant, and Montecito Country Mart, I believe is the other one. And these companies were also, some of them gracious enough to post our campaign on their own social media sites, getting us more views. We also sent out press releases. I think each jurisdiction sent out their own press release about the campaign. And we also sent it in our Creeks Division e-news, and it went out in the city's e-news and various other communications from all the cities in the county. And we got some nice news coverage, including a KEYT segment and some written articles on these local news outlets. So all of this outreach was leading people back to the Close the Poop Loop website, closethepooploop.org. And when people got to this website, they would see a scrolling image of all of the different dogs that we selected. Here's our incentive again, and asking them to make a personal commitment by taking a pledge to scoop the poop every time. And so some of the results that we found with the campaign, with our goal of getting people involved in the campaign, we had 45 people send in photos of their dogs to share on the website. And so I think people love sharing photos of their dogs. That wasn't a problem. And decreasing the numbers of unattended pet waste. You can see in January at our pre-campaign survey, we only found 10 poops. There were 2 unbagged and 8 bagged, which to me was a pretty surprisingly low number, particularly over 3 days total. And so after 3 months of the campaign, we were promoting the campaign February, March, April. In May, the consultant came back for 3 days and counted again, and we had 1 less pet waste left there at the beach. So not a huge number, but there are variables like the time of the year, what day of the week. The first 3 surveys took place on a Thursday, a Sunday, and a holiday Monday. And the post surveys were a Wednesday, a Monday, and a Friday. And so time of year, length of the daylight on a particular day, how many people could come after work. So there are a lot of variables. It's encouraging to see that we did have less instead of more, but it wasn't a spectacular drop in the numbers. But here we have some really great numbers. We had our goal of 250,000 impressions, and we hit 441,000, which is awesome. So the 250,000 goal comes from our consultant SGA's. When they do an annual campaign, they're looking for 1 million. And so in just that quarter, we got nearly half that, which is really great. And our goal of 250 pledges, you can see we doubled that. We got just over 500. We had 511 people sign our pledge to scoop their poop every time. And you can see that a large number, 136 of those, were residents of the city of Santa Barbara. So we had a large participation from city residents. And our goal of 300 newsletter signups. So when people signed the pledge, they were asked, do you want to receive more communications from the campaign? So should we decide to expand on this campaign, this is kind of a base group that we can send information out to. And so we had 468 total, and again, 26%, or 124 of them, were City of Santa Barbara residents. And just another point about how engaged people were at this campaign. When we sent the thank you email, just thanking them for signing up, letting them know that their little keychain was on the way, when we look at people opening up newsletters like this, the industry standard hovers around 28%, and we got almost 60% of people opening that thank you email. And then we had our clicks, and the standard for clicks is about 3.5. So when people open up an email, how likely are they to click on a link within that email? Not very. And we had almost 7% click on the email. And that's pretty cool, I think, also because there wasn't really a call to action within the email. It was just a thank you, but there were links to the campaign. And so people were still interested enough to go back and look at it again. So we got our draft final report last night, so I did not have a chance to distribute this to you guys. I brought a couple copies if you'd like to flip through them. But the recommendations from SGA, you're going to hand those up? Thanks. And I can email that to you if you'd like. So some recommendations were to extend the campaign to a year, and then maybe we would see, looking at the same point in time, see a more accurate difference in the numbers. They suggested considering limiting the target area to one location in South County and one in the north. And like I said, we just got this last night, so we haven't had a chance to really talk to them more about what they mean by these. Increasing in-person outreach efforts, which is always great. In-person communication and outreach always seems to do better than just putting information out there. Tailoring materials to each target location, including type and or number of materials. Additional number of materials placed in each target location. And they noted that signs were likely not seen. And I will say that at Arroyo Burro, we did have 4 of our signs disappear over the course of the campaign. So I had ordered extras at the beginning, so we were able to replace those. And we also had a park ranger moving our sign. So we had it at the steps near the beach, and he would move it over by the trash can where people who have already picked up their poop would see it. And we wanted people to see it before they entered the beach. So that was another thing that might have changed our results. They also suggest that we provide actively engaged residents with materials like the lawn signs. And we did have several requests from community members. We had somebody come by our office yesterday asking if they could get one to put in front of their house. So I think that if we do expand the campaign, that's definitely something that we would consider. And they also suggested providing a different incentive option, like just doggy bags rather than the keychain. And then also utilizing the people who were very engaged, like the people that sent in the top dog photos and people who signed up for the newsletter to help spread the campaign to their friends. And so our next steps, we should be finalizing this report in the next couple of weeks, and then we will have a chance to meet with the other jurisdictions and hopefully the consultant as well and talk some more about how we felt the campaign did and whether and how we will expand the campaign. And then this will be submitted to the state along with our SWIMP annual report. So with that.
Thank you very much, Liz. Excellent update and report, very informative. Are there any questions for Liz about closing the poop loop report as an adjunct to the stormwater management plan annual stuff? James? Betsy? Penny?
Question. I just wanted to say thanks. And Henry's is a beach we often, at my work capacity at Channel Keeper, hear complaints about people finding dog poop bags, and maybe you've even spoken with some of the same concerned community members, but we've heard numbers of around 30 on a given busy summer day. So it's great to target there, and that's right near where I live and go to the beach, so it's great to hear people are hopefully picking up their dog poop, and thanks for the great campaign.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I noticed the ratio of the requests for pledges and personal commitments is 0.1% of the 250,000 that we're blasting out there. I know it's always risky at a public hearing to guesstimate what level of reduction in material left behind on the beach we can see across the rest of the year. But do you have any expectations within the office for where we'd be when we're getting a report this time next year?
I don't have any specifics in mind at this point. I think we were surprised to start at such a low number in the first place, and so there's not a long way to go there, I think. There's not a lot of room for improvement, maybe. If we could get down to 0, it would be excellent, but it's tough to get that message through to 100% of the population.
Yeah, and since Arroyo Burro is such a popular beach, not only with locals, but with visitors, because it's one that they can access right off of 101. And do we have any plan during the peak season to have people out there actually talking to people who come with pets who might not already be residents and aware of our outreach efforts?
Not at the moment, but as I said, we'll be meeting with the other jurisdictions and the consultant to talk a little bit more about how to expand the campaign. So I think that's a great idea, and person-to-person outreach is definitely the most effective way to get the message across. So that's a good...
And are our friends with Dog Pack actively cooperating in the outreach effort again this year?
That I'm not sure of. I don't think that they were directly involved in this campaign, or if they were, it was maybe with the county as a partner and not with the city.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your follow-through on all the details, because the excitement and pressure of execution was so much that my friends at Esau's haven't survived the outcome of the study. So, well, I mean, that's not true. They survived, but they exist now only in Carpinteria. So, yeah. Betsy?
Just a quick question, looking at this report from you. What was the location of the city of Goleta that they're focusing on?
The city of Goleta, they did along El Encanto Creek. That was their spot.
James?
Just one follow-up. Liz, has there been any consideration of adding, for lack of a better word, a stick to the carrots that you guys have been using in the educational campaign? Just, throwing this out there, maybe advertising what the consequences are for not picking up after your dog?
Right. We have included that information in some of our other dog-related outreach. We went to the Trails and Tales event at the Botanic Garden last year, and we had some information that talked about it being illegal, and this is the fine. So that is something that we have discussed, but it was not a part of this particular campaign.
But a lot of people...
Either 100 or 250. I had 100, I think, from the municipal code, but it might be 250.
A lot of people are unaware of the fact that Dwayne Johnson and his team are in negotiations with the city right now for an upcoming film where he plays an undercover pollution control enforcement officer. And I think as publicity about that starts to circulate, that reports of potential violations on the beach or in town will dramatically go down. But any last questions for Liz on report for Section 7B on closing the poop loop and the stormwater management program? Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks to you so much, Liz. And that brings us to item 7A, which is Dr. Jill Murray. And she is going to be updating us on the water quality research and monitoring program with an update for fiscal year 2016.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to go over the background and goals of the research plan. The research plan was attached to the staff report. I'm just going to briefly go over the organization of it, the elements, and it's very similar to last year's, so I'm not going to go into each element in the research questions. I'll just share with you what's been changed since last year, and then give an update on some results that we've gotten so far, and finish with next steps. So we are always seeking to quantify the amounts of pollutants and what those pollutants mean. What do the concentrations mean? How do they compare with known toxicity thresholds or recreational impact thresholds? We are evaluating the effectiveness of any project that we can and collecting baseline data for future projects. When we do find pollution problems, as much as we can, we try to find the sources, track them to their inputs. We're evaluating long-term trends in a few select sampling locations, and that's with our easier-to-measure parameters such as fecal indicator bacteria and temperature and pH. One of the most common questions we get is water quality getting better, and so we will continue to track that in some areas. Oftentimes we have grant requirements to conduct certain sampling. We have new permit requirements to comply with our general permit, and we're always trying to address any 303D impaired water bodies. All of this is in order to kind of feed knowledge to our programs so we can help strategize and prioritize for future projects and programs. And we're always trying to communicate with the public and let them know about water quality and what we've learned. The program's very question-driven. Every sample that we collect, there's a question behind it. We're always seeking input, so any committee members or public members who have suggestions of what kinds of questions we should be asking, we welcome them. And we change things every year, and sometimes we change them mid-year based on what we're finding. If you look through the research plan, you'll see it's organized into our general monitoring that supports our general permit requirements, our grant requirements, our general watershed assessment. We do a lot of storm monitoring. The questions that we are asking for storm monitoring change every year or two. Restoration and water quality project assessment, source tracking and illicit discharge detection, and we do our creek walks and cleanups and bioassessment, which you heard about very recently. So for this coming year, we're taking 2 projects out because they've been completed, and I'll briefly go over those in just a minute, verification monitoring and the grant-required part of our LID parking lot projects monitoring. And then we've added 2 projects. One is Neonic Pesticides, and one is a microbial source tracking project that's being done almost exclusively by UCSB, but it benefits the city, and I'll go into that. So for the project monitoring, we are trying to assess the performance of LID projects, and these are projects that put as much of the rainfall as possible into the ground, which makes our normal way of assessing performance really difficult. Normally, we would collect our upstream and downstream samples and look for decreases in concentrations of pollutants or loads, and that's just, our projects tend to not have under drains. Some infiltration projects do, but we really don't have a way to sample downstream. So our approach, and this has been strongly supported by the Water Board, who's provided the grants to put the projects in, is to try and get a good average concentration of runoff at all of our sites before the projects go in. And then after the project is completed, we can then multiply that concentration times the amount of rainfall and have a pretty good estimate of the load of pollutants that we're keeping out of the creeks. And this is just an example. It shows how we're doing this. We're also trying to average results over several storms, but then for each storm, we're trying to collect flow-weighted samples and then composite them so we have our best possible average that we can get given our budget and our storm and our staff resources. So the left-hand graph shows we've taken the quantitative precipitation forecast for a storm and we've broken it into 3 sections of projected rainfall amount, then tried to hit the midpoint of each of those, collect bottles, and then at the end we mix them all together and pour them into the actual sample bottles and send them off to the lab. That's Tim Burgess collecting some runoff at Alameda Park. And this panel on the right shows the actual storm and where we collected samples from each site. So this one we thought we would start our sampling at 6, and we didn't start our sampling until midnight. That's just the way it goes. And this shows this is the rainfall for the whole year, and the yellow ovals are where we collected the samples. So you can see we had a pretty good representation of the limited amount of storms that we got last year. This is cumulative rainfall over the entire season, which didn't go very high, 1 to 9 inches. And this is we come back to the office. We've got a lot of bottles and jugs, and get out our measuring cups and mix and stir and shake and swirl, and then send them off to the labs. And so these are the kind of numbers we can get. We've got for each of our pollutants on the left, we've got our EMC stands for Event Mean Concentration. It's a stormwater modeling jargon term. And you would even say that this is an average EMC because we've averaged it over 3 storms and 6 sites. So we're trying to really get something we can apply for future projects without having to go through all of this pre-project monitoring. And then we can say for every inch of rainfall, how we can convert that to the number of gallons of rainfall that represents at all of the sites combined, multiply that times that concentration. And so we can say, looking forward, for every inch of rainfall that we infiltrate, we've removed this amount of each of these pollutants. And we keep track of whether we've infiltrated all the runoff with the level loggers that Tim Burgess has talked to you about that are in the monitoring wells. So we've infiltrated everything so far, but if there are some big storms, we'll know where we stopped that infiltration. And then then we can calculate for the entire last rainfall season what we kept out of the creeks. And for all of the 6 parking lots combined, we kept 360 kilograms, or about 750 pounds of sediment and any associated pollutants out of the creeks, and that's pretty good. We're making incremental improvements here. Neonic Pesticides, I've talked to you about this before. And the last time I talked to you about it, we had collected 1 set of creek samples from 1 storm event and 1 set of creek samples from dry weather. And since then, we've done more runoff samples, and we've done more creek samples in wet weather. So it's the neonics are the most widely used pesticides globally. And in California, one called imidacloprid is by far the dominant one used. It's used in agriculture. It's used in urban settings, in garden uses. For agriculture, the seeds are treated and the entire plant tissue becomes toxic, and that's really a problem for pollinators. But we're finding out that because the soil is also doused and maybe even rotting plant material that had this in it is decomposing and getting into creeks. And it's kind of, if you think about how to design the worst pesticide possible for creeks, this is about it. Very high solubility, so much higher than the most recent class of concern, which was pyrethroids. They really stick to sediments, and even though we know we have some of them, they don't appear to be causing toxicity. But the neonics are extremely soluble, and in the pesticide registration tests, they had very short half-lives in well-lit water, but in dark soil, they can persist for over a year. So it could be accumulating in sediments. This is a map. This is a great resource on USGS. You can pick any pesticide and look at the mapping of the use over the years that they have data for. So this shows from 94, 99, and 2011 how much imidacloprid has increased in spatial application and in the dosing or the amount of application per acre. And this shows the increase in California, and this is hard to see, but the blue is imidacloprid. So you can see of all of the neonics, imidacloprid is the most widely applied agriculturally, and then the black bar is total sold. So we're doing a very big experiment in California. This is a schematic. I won't go into the details, but showing how even trying to target the plants, it can leach and run off into water bodies. It can slowly, it's probably not acutely toxic in our waters, but slow, cumulative, chronic toxicity, and has been shown to actually lead to lower bird abundances and diversity and macroinvertebrate abundances in most of the studies have been done in Europe. So we've continued. We're really concerned about this. This is the first pesticide that we've said, we really need to know what is going on. We need to know more about how widespread is this in the city, and we're also trying to do what we can to let people know at a statewide level what we're finding. So we've taken a total of 28 samples. The only one of the neonics that we found is imidacloprid. We never found it in the dry weather samples, which kind of helps me feel confident in the results. There's kind of a mechanistic explanation for why we did not find it in the dry samples. We are continuing to find it. We found it in every wet weather creek grab sample, and I don't think that we've hit the highest concentrations at all because we didn't do the first flush. We found it in 11 of 16 runoff samples where we've collected them from the parking lots for the projects. And it did, we don't have tons of data, but it appears to be decreasing in concentration over the season. And the results are in ecotoxicity ranges shown in literature, but the EPA's toxicity benchmark is much, much higher. And that's really a concern because that's why the California Department of Pesticide Regulation can't really just straight out say these concentrations are too high because the EPA benchmark is much higher. And we've been reaching out to NGOs that are working on pesticides to try and get some traction with these results. We've applied for a Sea grant with partners from UCSB. We want to do more monitoring, ecotoxicity studies, and modeling to predict what the results would actually mean, what kind of harmful ecological effects could be found or expected. And we've made it through the first cutoff for that application, so that's exciting. We put something in the City of Santa Barbara legislative platform about supporting any future state legislation reducing contamination in surface waters. And we've also been working with CASCA to figure out the best ways to reach out to the California Department of Pesticide Regulations. If we do get this grant funding, it will involve a lot of storm monitoring. Yes, go ahead.
For the benefit of those who are watching at home who are not already biochemists, could you explain what CASQA stands for?
That stands for the California Association of Stormwater Quality. And that is, it's really a group of municipalities that work together to, I don't know exactly what their mission is, but I think create the strongest permitting activities that they can. And there's a pesticide subcommittee, and they were very involved with changing the pyrethroid labeling that will hopefully lead to a lot less pyrethroids in the environment. Okay, this will be a very brief overview. Verification monitoring. This is us saying we've done so much in the microbial source tracking realm. We have studied a lot. We have found a lot of problems. They've been fixed. There have been a lot of sewer lines that have been repaired prophylactically, rehabbed. Can we actually see an improvement in water quality as measured by the DNA-based and chemical human waste markers? And so we have had a small contract with UCSB to go in and do some follow-up testing at some of our key locations where we had high and consistent signals of human waste. And we found at all of the sites we looked at the elimination or very strong improvement in the signal of human waste markers. And more microbial source tracking. I think this is really exciting. We, a couple of years ago, worked with UCSB to get a grant application in to the Water Board's Clean Beaches Initiative grant program, and that we sort of thought of a laundry list of what are our outstanding questions. UCSB worked up what they really wanted to work on, and then the Water Board, the CBI program, really let us know what they wanted to focus on. And so combined, Dr. Holden at UCSB got the grant, and the agreement has been funded and started. And so they're focusing on 3 beaches, 2 of which are in the city of Santa Barbara, Ledbetter and East Beach at Sycamore. and they are applying a technique, a set of protocols that's from a document called the SIP manual, stands for Source Identification Protocol Project. This was also funded by the Clean Beaches Initiative, and it really followed on our prior project, the city's prior project with Clean Beaches Initiative called the Source Tracking Protocol Development Project. So what we did a few years ago really fed into this statewide protocol, which is then being applied back, it's kind of full circle. Now it's being applied to Ledbetter and East Beach at Sycamore. And it'll be 2 summers of testing, and it's starting this summer. They've already started. If then they come back and talk to the stakeholders, which are us and others, about results. If there are any obvious human waste problems that need to be addressed, they would stop right there. We would try to, find them, fix them. They're not allowed to just kind of keep studying without stopping and fixing problems. And so additional sampling will probably take place in year 2. And for anyone who's curious, the third beach is Goleta Beach. And that won't start until next summer. And it was neat because these 2 beaches kind of just met the criteria for inclusion in this project. And I heard the grant manager, the person who really decides who gets the grants at the stakeholder meeting, say, these are not the most contaminated beaches, but the stakeholder support here is amazing. And so we wanted, and what we already know about the infrastructure here is so amazing that they wanted to, and this is some of the last pool of this money, they really wanted to use it here. So we're really benefiting from that. And our next steps will be to carry out our research plan and give it the next water quality report and get back to you in, that's not right, we'll get back to you in December. And I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murray. Really great report. Our former council liaison, Councilman Frank Hotchkiss, and we really miss him since he's been replaced by Councilman Greg Hart. Frank always used to say that his support was really strengthened by having recommendations based on sound science. And the fact that we have a trained scientist running this program and people who are either reading the report or watching the steps and the partnerships with agencies and with scientists at UCSB and in the private sector with Geosyntec have to be really impressed that you're meeting and exceeding that standard that Councilman Hotchkiss set out for really strong credibility with elected officials, that the Sound Science Foundation is really strong. So I want to thank you year after year for just making a good program even better. Are there any questions on Dr. Murray's report?
Well, I'll thank Chair Moldiver.
We do have one.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. Appreciate it. I just want to echo everything that Mr. Moldiver said. Your contributions to this program is really valuable. Just first question, are we going to be, or is Creeks going to be continuing LID parking lot monitoring in years FY17? Because I know we have some permeable pavers projects coming online right now, or in the works, I should say. Yes, Mr. Huckins. This past year, we collected the samples for all of the streets, alleys, and sidewalks project. Well, not all of them. We still need to. We've collected enough to satisfy our grant requirements. We could continue to collect some additional runoff at Quarantina because that site won't be constructed until next summer. So then this coming year, we'll do all of our calculations. So we're ready to go after the projects are constructed. Sorry, the monitoring happens before the actual construction takes place.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yes. And so the monitoring that I talked about tonight was actually the monitoring for the parking lots project.
Right.
We've since collected a lot of samples for the streets, sidewalks, and alleys, but we haven't used them to calculate any load reduction yet.
Okay. Thank you. And then just one other question. So the Neonic issue, are these pesticides that you can buy at the local hardware store right now?
Yes, certainly. I'll go back a couple slides and show some labels. So the tree and shrub care. So I think that's 12-month protection. You can put that around a tree and you don't even have to identify a pest first. I think that's one of the attractions for this kind of pesticide is it's systemic. You don't have to see it. It's very preventative. You don't have to see any particular pests ahead of time. You don't see it. It's so invisible. But yeah, you can buy this at all of the home and garden centers. We had an outreach meeting with a local commercial pest control company, and they let us know that they receive every single person in their profession receives very strict training and repeated training, yearly training about how to apply products, and their labels constantly change. Their concern was that the labels for the over-the-counter the home and garden sector, they are much less specific. No one's trained in this. People think if you put on a little more. And so that is very concerning.
And then I guess this is probably a question for Mr. Benson. I think we've talked before about potential legal issues with, the city taking more proactive action on these kind of pesticides, that it's really just in the state's purview, which is probably why we're talking about it being in the city's legislative platform, which is great.
Yes, Mr. Hawkins, that's right. For pesticides, generally speaking, the state occupies the field for any kind of regulation. We are allowed to do outreach, and we've been working on the outreach and education efforts. As Dr. Murray mentioned, with commercial pesticide applicators, we also have been where we can trying to do outreach to the public about the concerns with this. But yes, it has to be something that's worked through the Department of Pesticide Regulation, and we've been trying to work with organizations who work regularly with them, as well as looking for opportunities to work with legislators and specific legislation addressing this type of pesticide.
Well, I think our leadership on this has been excellent, and looking forward to continuing to make progress in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Yeah, I've got kind of a follow-up with the AI-LA and the Green Gardener program and the Men's Garden Club and Steve at the Botanic Garden. Are we doing outreach to try to get the word out to the people who are really well respected in the field, to encourage their people to keep their eyes open and be careful?
No, and you suggested that at the last meeting, and we did follow up with the pesticide or the exterminators, but we did not follow up with the garden community, and you've just given us an additional list of names. I think you suggested we talk to the master gardeners last time, and we did not get to that yet. So we'll move this.
Because I think there's so many people who are getting into the landscape field, and they're very hard workers. They take a lot of pride in their work, and they want to do the right thing. And so there's certain groups in the community that they really look up to if they haven't had advanced training and certification themselves. So if we can informally, rather than from a regulatory perspective, get the word out, to the Green Gardeners program, or to the Men's Garden Club, or to the Botanic Garden, which has a huge mailing list, or the Institute of Landscape Architects, who work with a lot of the contractors and maintenance people after they've laid out the garden, and just say, be careful how you use this, or whatever. I couldn't help noting on your map that if I was any kind of a hymenoptera in the Great Lakes or the upper Midwest, I would really be thinking of moving to Canada or something. That whole area was almost completely black on the map from Ohio all the way to the Dakota line.
I think that really came from the soaking the corn seeds being treated in it. Once that became commercially available, exploded. But Canada is having trouble also, and some of the best research has come out of Canada. And then I think Ontario did a province-wide ban on neonics, I think. I also want to follow up on one of your prior comment, which was supporting our program. So much of what we've done is only possible because of Measure B. We are so far ahead in trying to get grant funding and trying to let the regulators know, we're doing a good job because we were able to start the research with the Measure B funding, and it's just been so great. You do a pilot test with Measure B funding, then we can go to Sea Grant and say, now we'd like $200,000 to do additional work. And so once again, I'm just so appreciative to the community for supporting Measure B and for the committee for supporting our research program.
I do have one other thought that seems kind of strange, but it kind of piggybacks on Liz's earlier thing about effective communication and education and outreach. And that is, we're in the bottom ebb of a historic drought right now. So we haven't had a lot of storms and runoffs to measure. So it would seem like with the economy recovering, if the Creeks Division could make a list of 2 or 3 simple things that they would encourage property owners to look at to reduce runoff or risk or whatever, trying to hire contractors now when it's dry and money is available might be really good, because there's always the chance, depending how you feel about the accuracy of climatologists' computer models, that a year from now we could be coming off of a pretty wet winter if a big El Nino forms. And so it could be we could be having a lot of runoff, and the numbers that we get for next year could be way different than the ones we've gotten for this year or last year. But on the other hand, because it's so dry, there's a tremendous opportunity for property owners to walk around and really assess opportunities for improvement on their property or their plumbing system, or how they apply chemicals. A lot of people are re-landscaping for the xeriscape anyway. That would be a real opportunity as the turf comes out and the drought-resistant plants come in, to have a guide that shows that maybe that kind of xeriscape doesn't need as much chemical protection as a, Kentucky bluegrass or whatever.
I think that's excellent advice, and we have talked about our next Inside Santa Barbara segment, incorporating some ideas that people might want to take before it starts raining again.
Well, I know the NBA playoffs are over, so I can't say that our audience is dashing to watch Game 6 or 7, but it's been a great report. And are there any last questions for Dr. Murray? Okay, let's wrap up then on item 7A, and that brings us to item 8, which is time and place of the next meeting and a motion to adjourn.
Just a point of order. Do we need to approve the?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for the fiscal year and for the report. Is there a motion to do that?
I'll move to approve as recommended.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the staff recommendations and implement the proposed research and monitoring plan for fiscal year 2016 based on the highlights that Dr. Murray has just shared with you, as well as the written report. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? You're a great salesperson. It looks like it passes unanimously, which now, thank you very much. Now it brings us to item number 8, which is time and place of the next meeting and a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next meeting will be Wednesday, July 15th at 5:30. I think we're going to be planning a site visit to get out of the room and go check out one of the projects we have under construction this summer.
Well, it's a great way to rebound from revels on Bastille Day. What could be better on the 15th than a site visit in the outdoors? So is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn the meeting at 6:25 p.m. on Wednesday, June 17th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. Great meeting.
Think about the girl and never